Laura with Rain Tree Nursery. And right here, I have a beautiful, mature Shiro plum that is a fabulous candidate for some restoration pruning. Restoration pruning is something that you do if a tree hasn't been pruned in a number of years. There can be many reasons why you'd have to do a large-scale restorative pruning. Perhaps you've been sick and haven't gotten to pruning your trees in a while. Maybe you just bought a new piece of property that has some mature trees that haven't seen the pruners for a few years. And this is how to think about and practice restoration pruning. So if you're keeping up on your pruning on a yearly basis, about the only tool you'll really need is a handset, maybe a pair of loppers if you're really taking something big off. When you're doing restoration pruning, however, these are the smaller versions of the tools that you'll be using. In many cases, you'll need a string trimmer to take care of grass and weeds at the base of an old tree. And also in many cases, you'll have enough broken branches of enough size that you would use an arborist saw or even a chainsaw. Now, the first order of business when you get into a big pruning job is to make sure that the surface under the tree is flat and as even as you can get it. Working with a lot of heavy grass like this is a recipe for disaster. You'll trip, things can get caught. Just go after it with a string trimmer or a mower if you can get one under there. Start with a nice clean surface to make your work safe. Now we're going to do this in sequence. Restoration pruning sequence is very similar to a fine pruning sequence. Number one, you don't want to take off more than a third of the living wood at any time. Now, because this is a mature tree, we can afford to take off a lot of branches here because it's a large tree, but we are paying attention to make sure that we don't take off more than a third, which can be stressful to the tree. And also, the first things that we want to look at are broken limbs and dead wood. Now, here is an example of how if you don't prune your tree, Mother Nature will prune it for you, and sometimes in ways that you don't like. This is a plum. It has long, graceful branches. If you're not regularly tipping those branches back, if you get a heavy snow load, these very long branches will break and split off from the trunk, and that's exactly what happened here. So this is our first order of business. Now the last bit of cutting I'm going to do here is from the top down so that I don't inadvertently capture my saw blade while I'm cutting. In fact, it's going to be a little long. I can go back and do some fine tuning after I've made this major cut. Next, we move on to dead wood. There is a whole bunch of dead wood on the extension of this branch right here. So I think I'm going to take it back to right about here. Now I happen to be a big fan of low branching because it's easier to harvest from. I could take this branch all the way back to here if I really wanted to do something extreme, but that would make it difficult to harvest from. So I'm going to play it a little safe and just take it right back to here. Number 3 in the sequence is crossing wood. Here we have an example of 2 branches that are crossing each other. They're bumping right up against one another and rubbing. That rubbing will cause ulcers where disease can get in. So you need to make sure to pick your favorite branch and cut the other one. This is a little bit too big for my pruner hand sets, so I'm going to go after it with the lopper. I'm going to take this one because I like the way that this one goes, so I'm going to take the smaller. Tight work. There we go. And right next to it is another example of crossing wood. You can see this branch is leaning right on top of this larger one here. So I'm going to take the small one out as well. There we go. One more set of branches that really need to go are branches that are pointing into the center of the tree. You always want to keep the center as open as possible to allow light penetration so the fruit sweetens and ripens fully, and to allow airflow to keep from having problems with fungal diseases. So as you can see, the branch wants to go this way, but these branches want to go back into the center of the tree. They're out of here. One thing we haven't had to deal with on this plum tree is disease. That would certainly be something that you would look for. Cankers, pockets of gummosis or oozing sap, burls. If you see any of that, of course, that has to get cut out. And that wood you should throw away or burn instead of just putting somewhere else on the property to allow it to decompose. You never want to compost diseased wood. And last thing on this tree, we're getting close to our 1/3 limit of removal, but we need access to this concrete pad. This poor tree has overgrown this pad dreadfully. So we're gonna skirt it up a little bit. We're gonna lift the branches so that we can get under here to use the pad and also to safely mow. And here it is, our final pile of prunings. We stopped because we reached our 1/3 limit. There's certainly more that we'll go back and do to this tree next year. We'll fine tune opening up the crown a little bit more for airflow and light penetration. But what we did today, this was restoration pruning. We were going back in and fixing problems from the past. We took out broken wood. We took out dead wood. We looked for diseased wood. We took out crossing branches. We made sure there were no branches heading back into the center of the tree. We skirted up the tree so it's a little bit easier to access and maintain. And on a wide tree like this, we'll go back and tip back the branches a little bit so they're not quite so extending. Feels good. Thanks for joining us. It's Laura with Rain Tree Nursery. Keep on a-growing.